in Beijing and Washington. That's all I have to say.
Right, Mr. Dwivedi, a very interesting perspective. I'll follow up with you on this, but let me first rope in Mr. Srivastav on another issue that is of importance. Sir, Marco Rubio has also accompanied the delegation, and the fact that he was a sanctioned individual in China, and then China, Beijing is now giving it, this a big concession. How do you look at this development?
Well, Marco Rubio, currently he's the Secretary of State, though he has been having a very tough views on China when he was a U.S. Senator, and those times were somewhat different, and he is holding a very important position at this point of time as a U.S. Secretary of State, which China can't ignore. And when this summit level meeting is happening between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, Secretary of State's role is of enormous significance, which China will have to acknowledge. And no matter what the views Marco Rubio has been having with regard to China, or maybe he's still having, but when you are in office and when you represent an establishment, then you may have to, adjust your views according to the current level of relationship and the kind of issues that both the nations are having. Accordingly, you will have to amend your, various views and ways to deal with some other countries, despite the fact that you may have personally a very different opinion on that country. So I think Marco Rubio himself will realize that what kind of a significant relationship the Chinese-US relationship is. And I think when he is at this position as the Secretary of State, he will be far more cooperative than what he was previously. And similarly, when China has had some sanctions on Marco Rubio for his tough views on China, I think that China will also realize that at this point of time, he is dealing with China with the capacity of U.S. Secretary of State. So I think that changes, and that does happen in international relationship, and nothing is stable, and things are and developments are quite dynamic, and accordingly the countries and establishments of various nations, they do adjust their views and positions and policies according to the changing times.
Right, right. Mr. Tejawat, what do you believe? How does this signal? Because we have Marco Rubio, a once sanctioned individual in China. We also have Pete Hegseth, who calls himself as the Secretary of War, who is accompanying US President Donald Trump as well. Now, this is for the first time that a defense secretary like Pete Hegseth is accompanying a US president to Beijing since 1972. So, does this signal that the US wants to be very careful on military issues as well, so that there is no fallout of this meeting, that the US wants to keep their focus on trade during these negotiations?
In fact, the most of diplomat who was deployed there at China as ambassador or maybe, so I know a few of them, and they said that the China is totally different. We cannot deal with the China in the same way what we are doing with the Western countries. So basically, I remember when the president election was in China, and Mao, almost in the middle of the night, he asked President Nixon to come and meet, because it was Mao's schedule. He usually starting his schedule late hours. So in the middle of when he was a bit drowsy situation and he was sleepy, and he come to meet the Mao. So that was the China. And in a conference when they started saying that, okay, this one is the Middle East and we are having that strategy, then Mao looked at them and they said that for you it might be the Middle East, for us it's not a Middle East, for us that one is a West Asia. So that's from the Chinese. And here, even in this talk, the Chinese has put a clear boundary that United States must learn that what's their boundary. The China know it very well that how to run a country and what their interests are. So United States is not supposed to tell them that what the China is doing. So I suppose that that one is the series of these incidents where the China believes that China's foreign policy and its planning is totally free and not dependent on a United States. That's why I suppose these kind of actions and reactions is a continuous part and the series of the Chinese beliefs where they believe that the China's viewpoint is a major viewpoint and the rest of the world must acknowledge it. That's why the China has put in, even in this talk, the China has put the clear boundaries. First, the China has stated that if the United States will bring the Taiwan in a talk, then of course the China is not going to even discuss about the Taiwan issue, because recently the United States has almost agreed to sell the 11 billion weapons and the jets to the Taiwan. And I suppose this one is not a good news for the China. So the Chinese people has put a clear boundary. Okay,
Right.
that we'll not speak about China in terms of Hormuz and Iran. The China has clearly said to the United States that what the China's interest, the China know it better. And when they were discussing the agenda for the meeting, because when the at that level the meeting is going to be happen, then they start preparation at least the 3 months in advance. Then during that time, the China clearly stated that the United States is not supposed to tell us that what are the human rights and what the Chinese should do. So I believe that what the China is doing is the continuous and at the part of that serial declaration and beliefs what the Chinese diplomats is having right at this moment.
Right.
Over to you.
Right, Mr. Tejawat. Very interesting perspective there as well. But let me, in fact, we are getting information that we do have the statement, some of the lines that have been, in fact, what the Chinese president has said during these negotiations. Let's listen in if we have that audio.
Era. Mr. President, I look forward to our discussions on major issues important to our two countries and the world, and working together with you to set the course for and steer the giant ship of China-U.S. relations so as to make 2026 a historic landmark year that opens up a new chapter in China-U.S. relations. I will pause here and hand over to you, Mr. President. President Trump, I'm very pleased to meet you in Beijing. Welcome back to China after 9 years. The whole world is watching our meeting. Currently, transformation not seen in a century is accelerating across the globe, and the international situation is fluid and turbulent. The world has come to a new crossroads. Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and create a new paradigm of major country relations? Can we meet global challenges together and provide more stability for the world? Can we, in the interests of the well-being of our two peoples and the future of humanity, build a brighter future together for our bilateral relations? These are the questions vital to history, to the world, and to the people. They are the questions of our times that you and I need to answer as leaders of major countries. This year is the 250th anniversary of American independence. Congratulations to you and to the American people. I always believe that our two countries have more common interests than differences. Success in one is an opportunity for the other.
All right, so there you have it. These are the first statements that we are getting for you from the Chinese President Xi during the negotiations that are in fact in dialogue that is taking place with the US President Donald Trump. Mr. Srivastav, President Xi is in fact stating that this 2026 is the start of a new chapter in the history of US-China relations. How do you think that will fare, given that he's also mentioned that the global situation is very fluid and turbulent?
I think these remarks are often made when you're welcoming a leader of another country. And obviously, this is a very significant visit. There is no doubt on that. And it is happening after a gap of 9 years. Last time President Trump went to China as president of the US in the year 2017. And a lot has happened during this time in 9 years between the two sides. And there have been several such presidential level meetings before too. And there have been interaction with President Biden and President Xi Jinping during the Biden administration years. But yes, President Trump has gone to Beijing after a gap of 9 years, and that is why such remarks are being made that it is so significant that this visit is happening. But there is no doubt that the reality of this relationship is that it is having a very deep sense of rivalry, competition, contestation. At the same time, when both the leaders are talking about cooperation, and that's the baseline, and that cannot be ignored. And I do not think that Chinese leadership is under any illusion that they are going to be facing a very tough competition with the United States of America in the years and decades ahead, be it in the Indo-Pacific region, or issues related to economy and trade, or Chinese growing ambition to have a more global footprint with their very assertive and aggressive Belt and Road Initiative policies. And obviously, United States of America does see China as a great rival and challenge in this century. So that's the baseline, and both the nations are quite clear, though they will not say these words in these kind of meetings, but there is no doubt that US knows that China is a big competitor, a big rival for the United States of America, and so does the China knows about the United States of America. So I think that's the key baseline which must not be ignored while analyzing US-China relationship. And I do not think that there is any possibility of having a kind of G2-like situation where the US and China will have a kind of a cooperation, and they will be compromising on one issue for another. I do not think that that's going to be happening. And United States of America cannot give more concessions or can do compromises on the issue of Taiwan. And the Taiwan issue is one of the key issues for the United States of America's Indo-Pacific policy. And United States of America is very much committed to defend Taiwan. And though, as I have been saying, as I said in response to your previous question, that US does have a policy of strategic ambiguity with regard to Taiwan, and they maintain that policy. United States of America has not reviewed its one China policy. They do maintain that one China policy. But having said that, I am very clear, and if you look at the remarks of US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, what he said during the Shangri-La dialogue a few months back, that if China becomes more aggressive towards Taiwan in times ahead, then the US might have to review its various policies with regard to China, one China policy, or the policy of strategic ambiguity. So I think that is a very baseline, and I do not think that any of the U.S. administrations, whether it is today's Republican President Donald Trump or maybe if any Democrats come in future, they are not going to be giving much concessions on the issue of Taiwan. And let me say here on the issue of Taiwan, I think United States of America's policy will be far more aggressive and assertive
Right.
Than what we are having on the issue of Ukraine.
All right,
That's what
Mr.
I'd say.
Srivastava, I'll come back to you. Also joining us on the broadcast is Professor Madhav Nalapat, who's the editorial, in fact, director of the Sunday Guardian. Thank you so much, Professor, for taking out your time for speaking to NewsX. Let me